It's funny how things change. Everything, at all times, always changing. I say funny, but it's really more weird than anything.
Change. Climate change.
Change their mind on things.
Can be life-changing.
And slightly overwhelming to actually think about. But after taking on this project, I've seen something change so much over such a long period of time that I feel like I understand change more. But still, at the same time, not at all. Maybe that's because one aspect of change that makes it so elusive to predict and understand is how it comes in so many forms. Like specifically for this story, where change comes in the form of something becoming way bigger than you originally intended. And then suddenly, along with lots of new expectations, you have the question of, is this suddenly way bigger thing even possible? Now, even more concerning than if it's even possible is the fact that from the beginning of this project, along with the records of everything, came the increasing knowledge of exactly how extensive those records are, progressively making me wander away from, is it even possible, and over to, is it all worth it anyway? This is the story of how things start as one thing, and inevitably change into something else. Or more literally, how two people attempted to build an entire world within a game in technically only 3 months. Dhakhar and I began collecting ideas for this project technically over a year ago, when I first lured him in on the dreamy idea of a project that would dwarf all Valheim projects before it. And whether or not this was even possible was never actually discussed, except the occasional, "It would be so cool, man," or "Bro, we need to do the adventure map." Admittedly, throughout that time, we at best haphazardly tossed ideas back and forth, with absolutely zero plan and frankly zero motivation to actually do anything with them. You see, at the time, they were just ideas, because I was waiting for something, a reason, a spark. But anyway, the ideas themselves were simple. We were thinking small back then. I mean, we even thought about raising a bit of land, for example, just barely beneath a damaged wall, and then through a puzzle providing a pickaxe to break the ground and break the wall. Clever, but any tool could break that wall, so later we would figure out that you really just need to know how to code the wall, or code a door. We even once thought about using tears in the terrain for a spot for something to pop up out of the ground. Not bad, but later we found ways to do this without a tear that were more hidden and customizable. Not to mention a player couldn't fall through into infinite darkness. Yeah. Now the problem wasn't figuring out these things. Dhakhar and I had endless ideas. The problem was figuring out the right way to do these things, which took time. Specifically an unknown amount of time, and that was the root of our lack of motivation, in part the reason for us not pushing forward initially. Ideas were mounting, but our apprehension was too. The only thought that could come to our minds was, is it even possible with so much to do, with just these ideas and with just the two of us? That's when we found our spark. I found out that another creator also had a need for this map, and we suddenly had a reason. That's when Dhakhar and I started building alpha version 1.0 of the world, with Gathalion and Atlas eagerly awaiting the download in their inboxes. They had their own project they would be working on, but we would all be promoting it together. More details in the first video on all of that. Now at the time, Dhakhar and I had no idea how much of our sporadic year-long idea sesh would be morphed and lobotomized, leaving almost nothing left in the end of any use. But it didn't matter. That didn't slow us down, because we were finally getting started. In the first video, I talked about the first version of the map and everything we did, and I'll sum it up here for you. We spent the first week of building just bringing in builds and modifying them off the edge of the world, creating the ultimate build graveyard to work from for the rest of the project. This is also where we would come for creative inspiration, which is a concept I learned from a legendary Minecraft YouTuber I used to watch back in the day.
Get some inspiration. Get some inspiration. I hope you guys got some inspiration.
Inspiration, inspiration, inspiration
is exactly what we needed now to keep on pushing forward. So after the first week, I started building the 5 main towns, each inspired by build graveyard builds. These 5 main towns would eventually link everything together with a story and lore. Well, hopefully anyway. Next, we created the 12 class-themed POIs, inspired from the 12 different classes within the Legends mod. Then we filled the gaps in the world with 13 more locations, many of which still haven't been shown on video. And finally, we built full-on boss arenas where amped-up boss fights would eventually take place. I definitely want people to discover them for the first time naturally, but here's another sneak peek. And I even finished it all off with a network of roads, albeit simple at the time, but nevertheless providing a way to travel smoothly between the POIs. So here we are, with over a year of off and on planning, and now with an entire month of building gone by, version 1 is complete. That's when I published the first video, and suddenly, something that was only a dream had now become a reality. So is it even possible? At this point, we still had no idea how much it would actually take, but we did know how many expectations we now had. Alpha version 1.1. I think there is a crossroads in every big project where you've progressed far enough that the end is just barely in sight, but with that, you also understand how far away it still truly is. This was that moment. The moment where we started to wander from, is it possible, to, is it even worth it? I mean, the original idea over a year ago, scribbled down in some notes in the back of an old notebook, was just a bunch of builds and roads and spawn points. If we were going to do this, then we had to push far beyond the original ideas, which, keep in mind, were already far beyond what anybody had ever done before. And the new goal would be to start to bring everything to life. We had locations, but they were simple, lifeless. They needed more. We had roads, but they were even more plain, and more importantly, they were for an open-world modded map for Gothalion and Atlas, which we were now changing to a linear, unmodded playthrough for us. And then we had our 5 main towns, which were the anchor to our ship, the thing that would be holding down the whole story. But at the moment, there simply was no story, just empty towns. And of course, there were a bunch of completely new locations that needed to be added for new ideas. Not to mention the whole thing, every piece, every build, every bit of code used had to be optimized or updated to get ready for players. Alpha version 1.1 was no joke. I mean, we were committing to an absolutely unknown amount of time at this point. Now more than ever, we had pushed past the first question of if it's possible, and onto the second question of, is it worth it? Well, I will say that the overwhelmingly positive comments online after my first video had certainly made us think so. Speaking of, thank you to everyone who showed up on my version 1.0 video that has offered feedback and just words of encouragement throughout this process. Not to mention, there are also all of the comments on Asmongold's React video. Dhakhar and I are eternally grateful for that, but at the end of the day, no amount of comments or views could answer if it's worth it. Because whether or not it's worth it is really up to you, the players. So with the unexpected success online for the project and the motivation from all of you, we went ahead with version 1.1. Every single location in the map got optimizations or upgrades, and 9 of them got major upgrades, including everything from pathing for quest lines, complete interiors built from scratch, extra buildings added on, extra optional loot rooms added, and much more. Then the roads. Well, I mean the bumpy trails that were hastily painted over the open world. Yeah, they were updated into a linear playthrough by choosing a final path through all the locations, deleting the old extra roads, and then smoothing and widening it all out. Then the 5 main towns were brought to life, with the first NPCs made from AI within the game, quest lines using storytelling techniques, and also lore to bring everything together under one set of stories. What do I really mean by that? Well, if you get a chance to play the world, you'll see that you're thrown into a setting with adventurers guilds, which are a shadow of their former selves. You and your party are the new adventurers sent to the realm of Valheim with a chance to please Odin by taking a shot at battling your way through the bosses, and of course, all of the other locations and stories along the way. And then there are also the Elders, which are the NPCs placed throughout the world that will help guide you on your journey and give you your quests. They are a bit of a mystery, but are thought to be old adventurers that gave up on trying to defeat the bosses and earn their way back into Valhalla, and instead are living out their lives in Valheim. So with adventurers guilds and elders and quests and lore, you can see how in version 1.1, the second version, we worked hard to start incorporating a story with goals into the 5 main towns. To finish it all up, we then added 7 completely new locations, some as landing points for portals, some as starting points for boat adventures, some for new quest lines, and more. Then we finally took on the task of optimizing every build and piece of code that we could. This is kind of the stuff I feel most people don't want to see much of, so let me know in the comments if you want a video or a video series on the nerdy side of this project. Okay. I've spent all this time talking about if it's even possible and if it's even worth it, but it wouldn't be a story if I didn't tell you how much it actually took. Well, beta version 2.0 is like nothing we ever imagined. First, I finished the roads. Finally, from the very beginning with bumpy painted on trails to the end, with smooth, widened, and feature-filled roads with bridges, lookouts, places to sit and rest, and more. Then we got to the hard work. This work entailed 3 things that were needed for every single location to come to life. The quests and NPCs, which we already did a trial run in the towns in the second version, then the loot, and then also the enemies. We started at the very beginning of the long road and went through every single location, adding those 3 things in that order. Getting started in each location by theorizing about what kind of story we could create, keeping in mind which road we were on. You see, each segment of road for us was named by the boss it approached. Each road for each boss got a specific set of lore and story tying it to that boss. A story that is designed to wrap up at each boss fight. Whereas you have the other story, the overarching story that we made in the 5 main towns in the last version, which is designed to wrap up at the end of the entire playthrough. So it's kind of like your main quest is in the 5 towns and your side quest is along the roads. After completing the story for a location, we had to add the loot. For the loot, we went through every vanilla loot item in the game and placed them throughout the playthrough to earn as you complete locations. Getting this right was obviously very tricky, but in general we were able to follow the order you get things in naturally in each biome as a guideline to help us out. Then after setting up a location with the story, and then all of the loot, we finished it off with the enemies, which needless to say caused a lot of noise and problems, of course, so we always saved them for last. Some examples here are traps, ambushes, regular enemies, uses for spawners, and also custom enemies and bosses. After completing these 3 things in every single location, at this point the map was almost complete. We did also add a lot of new locations never before seen, just like in the other versions, and we also added a lot of optimizations. But yeah, there was really one big thing left, and that was the boss fights and the boss loot rooms. We saved them for last, so that we could use all that we learned to get the enemies just right, since they were really supposed to hit hard with these boss fights, and also with the conclusion of the story or side mission for that boss. And when the fight is over, the boss even has a final death message for you, revealing the password for a portal that leads you into the boss's special loot room, almost like a boss lair or something. So beta version 1.0 is complete, coming soon for free for the public to test. It took 3 different versions of the map to get here, going all the way from lifeless locations and bumpy roads, then to more completed locations and the first stories in the main towns, and then finally to a world driven by stories with a long feature-filled road connecting everything. And it took well over 1,000 hours of work between the two of us. There are over 40 unique locations in total, and honestly, at this point, the only question I have is how it ended up being so different from what we originally wrote down so long ago. It's honestly crazy how far things come. Crazy how much things change. If it weren't for change, this project would have never been more than a few roads and builds.